The drama began at exactly 7:33 a.m. on June 21st, 2019, when a man named Nathan Robertson placed this 911 call to the Evansville Police Department.
911.
Yes, I got an emergency at 640 Maryland Street. I come over here to talk to my cousin's boyfriend, and when I get up there, he's laying in the kitchen all bloody. I don't know what's going on. The front door's wide open, and he's laying down. I don't know.
Is he breathing?
I don't know. I stepped back out.
Did you ever hear him talk or cry?
No, it sounded like he was in there gasping for air, but I don't know. It scared me. I turned around and walked out. I'm not going back in there. Yeah, I'm not going back in there.
Nathan stayed on the phone with dispatch until he noticed a fire truck and police cruiser headed towards him.
You go and talk to them, okay?
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Bye.
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 Body cams rolling, Officer Rick Bagby and his partner approached the house along with several firefighters. Nathan was already back on the phone, informing family and friends of the emergency.
Down in there in the kitchen, there's blood everywhere.
Police department.
As the officers entered the home, they noticed a trail of bloody footprints coming from the kitchen. Peering into the kitchen, they saw 27-year-old Corey Hughes lying face down in a pool of blood. He was just barely clinging to life, gasping for air.
Have fire come in. He's still moving and breathing.
Most firefighters in the United States are also trained as EMTs, so they headed inside to assess Corey themselves. It appeared that the left side of Corey's head had an exit wound from a gunshot. While the firefighters worked to keep Corey alive, the officers checked the rest of the house to see if anybody else was there.
Police department, anybody down here? Make yourself known.
As they went from room to room, they also kept an eye out for any weapons that might have been used in the attack. However, they found nothing notable, so they headed back to check on Corey. The paramedics had just arrived and were bringing in a stretcher for him. They strapped him in and carried him out to the ambulance. He was transported just 4 minutes away to the Deaconess S Hospital. While he underwent emergency surgery, the scene was secured and lead detectives Chris Jones and Mike Evans arrived. They noticed that although the home was messy, nothing was broken or knocked over, suggesting that Corey didn't have a chance to fight back before being shot. They believed he was shot with a single round from a .380 pistol, as indicated by the single shell casing found in the pool of blood. Perhaps the most valuable piece of evidence were the bloody footprints. They allowed the detectives to determine the kind of shoes that the assailant was wearing. Based on the pattern on the bottom of the shoes, they were a pair of Nike Air Force Ones. Also, since the attacker had tracked blood through the residence, they must have stayed inside the house long enough for a pool of blood to have formed. The detectives believed that this stretch of time was spent rummaging through the several drawers that were left open. It's uncertain what the killer was looking for, but thankfully they didn't find this wallet, which was tucked behind a mattress and had over $1,500 inside it. The last major piece of evidence that they found was Corey's phone. While the forensics unit documented and collected all of the evidence, Detective Evans reconvened with Nathan to gather some basic information.
So when you arrived, you just found...
The door was open a little bit, the main door. Like, I looked through the door, and I seen like a footprint of blood.
Right.
Nathan explained that he was headed to his shift at a local steakhouse that morning, but stopped by Corey's place first because he was buying a TV off of him. Corey was supposed to be moving from Indiana to Oregon that day, so for the past few weeks, he had been selling any belongings that he wasn't bringing with him. The detectives wondered if the attacker was aware that Corey had been selling his things and had killed him in order to steal the cash that was inside the house. At this point, Corey's ex-girlfriend and mother of his children, Megan Frazier, arrived at the scene begging for more information.
Okay, well, they're down at the hospital with the gentleman.
Can you please tell his family what's going on? Somebody.
We're trying to figure out what's going on.
Is he dead?
No.
He's not dead.
After learning that Corey was still alive, Megan rushed to the hospital where she received the tragic news. Corey had passed away. The detectives were eager to find his killer as soon as possible. They canvassed the area and questioned the neighbors about their mourning, but nobody heard or saw anything. However, one of the neighbors had a motion-activated security camera that could just see the front of Corey's house. Looking at Corey's text conversations, the last text that he sent was at 7:17 a.m., meaning he was still alive at this time. Nathan found Corey's body and placed the 911 call at 7:33 a.m. This means that Corey must have been killed within this 16-minute range. In the security footage, there are 3 times that the camera is activated around this time range. The first was at 7:14 a.m., 3 minutes before Corey's final text. Nothing significant happens in this recording, but it's important to note that the parking spot in front of Corey's house is empty. The second time the camera was activated was at 7:23 a.m. This time, a white SUV is parked in front of the house. Nobody is seen walking to or from this vehicle, so the detectives were unable to figure out who was driving it. The third clip was at 7:35 a.m. when first responders arrived at the house. In this footage, Nathan's vehicle is now parked in front of the house, and the white SUV is nowhere in sight. The detectives also found several other cameras that were pointed at the road. At 7:29 a.m., the white SUV can be seen driving down Maryland Street away from Corey's house. From this footage, they were able to determine that the vehicle was a white Chevy Trailblazer. Unfortunately, they couldn't see the driver and were unable to make out the license plate number. However, they did notice some distinct features that would be helpful in tracking the vehicle down. It had a sunroof and a roof rack, and the rear rim was black while the front rim was silver. It also appeared to be longer than a typical Trailblazer, indicating that it was an extended model. The detectives shared a screenshot of the vehicle with the rest of the police department and told them to keep an eye out. In deciding what their next steps would be, the detectives couldn't help but notice that Nathan had arrived at the house just 4 minutes after the Trailblazer left. Either the driver of the Trailblazer was extremely lucky, or Nathan was somehow involved in this convenient timing. They asked him to come down to the station for a formal interview.
Go back over what you told me this morning to make sure I've got all the facts. You're Nathan Roberts.
When I got there, I pulled up. I was in a hurry because I got to get back to the safe house. And when I got over to the porch, I walked over to the door and I seen that spotted blood right there inside the door. So that's when I stepped in there and I looked. I didn't go all the way in the kitchen. I stepped right there in the living room. But you know, once you get right to the doorway, you can look and see inside the kitchen. And I leaned over like that, and I seen him and I looked at him, and like I thought I heard him like gasping. So I turned around, went right back out the door and called trouble.
Was anybody leaving the house when you got there? Did you see anybody leaving?
No, I didn't see nobody leaving.
Do you have any idea who would want to hurt Corey?
Well, I thought he was a good dude.
Based on the interview, Nathan didn't seem to be tied to Corey's death whatsoever. Just to be sure, the detectives asked him to hand over his clothes and the keys to his vehicle. And after a thorough inspection, they found no evidence tying Nathan to the crime. The next person they wanted to interview was Megan Frazier. Corey and Megan were together for 5 years and had 2 children together. But they had separated just 3 weeks earlier. It's common for breakups to become extremely toxic, so the detectives wanted to know how Megan was handling the separation and if she had any motive to harm Corey. However, Megan was apparently so devastated by Corey's death that she was sick to her stomach while waiting for the detectives. Evansville detective Karen Montgomery conducted the interview and was sympathetic with Megan. She assured her that Corey's case was in good hands.
Let me start this by saying I'm sorry for your loss. Can't change things, but we certainly will work our hardest to find out who did this. When's the last time you physically saw Corey?
Sunday, 10:30 in the morning. I seen that he posted my stuff on Facebook for sale, and I asked him nicely to take it off, and he told me that I gave it to him, and I said I did not. The TV, the couch, the chair, everything, like, it was all my personal stuff.
According to Megan, she had bought these items over the course of the relationship, but Corey was claiming that they were his now that the two were separated. However, Megan was even more upset about Corey moving across the country and was worried about the effect that this would have on their kids.
I've been really upset with him because he's leaving my kids to go to Oregon, and I told him that wasn't fair and stuff like that.
The detective asked her what caused them to break up. Megan said that their relationship hadn't felt the same for a while, so she decided that the best thing for their family was to end the relationship.
You know, it was nothing like I was trying to hurt Corey. It was just the love died between us, and it just kind of, like, Corey's my best friend. And that's what I'm sick about. I love him to death.
When asked what she was doing at the time of Corey's death, Megan told the detective that she was working all morning. Following this interview, the detectives obtained her work records and were able to corroborate her alibi. Ultimately, they found no evidence of Megan's involvement, so once again they moved on with their investigation. Throughout these interviews, several officers were still monitoring the crime scene. Suddenly, 2 random women pulled up to these officers, saying that they had a potential lead regarding Corey's death. Apparently, one of their friends had a roommate named Ben that wouldn't stop talking about the murder. And out of nowhere, he announced that he was leaving Evansville.
This is Benjamin Bay. Benjamin Bay. She's got a tattoo right here.
And on his thing it says he does have guns. Now somebody got a text message and he said he's leaving town. And I'm going to tell you where they're at. Or I can take somebody there.
The detectives were informed of this new lead, and with a team of officers by their side, they headed to Ben's house to confront him. Since the women said that Ben had several guns, the officers were extra cautious. They surrounded the house from all sides, and just as they were about to order Ben to come outside, they noticed Ben's roommate pacing around the backyard.
Can we talk to the dude in your house? Can we talk to the dude in there?
The roommate was 37-year-old Jimmy Leslie, a U.S. Army veteran. Thankfully, everything goes smoothly, and Ben has no problem meeting with the officers outside. However, when he learned that he was a person of interest in Corey's murder investigation, he was not happy.
I want lawyers because, like they said, I do have the right to plead my Fifth Amendment, because I know for a fact that I have nothing to do with it.
Ben refused to go to the station for an interview with the detectives, so the officers decided to put him in cuffs and bring him in themselves.
Why am I being arrested? If I'm getting arrested...
You're not being arrested, you're being detained.
Why am I being detained?
Because they want to talk to you.
Fortunately, Ben's attitude changed, and he started to open up once he was brought to the interrogation room.
I've been selling Corey off and on for a while. I mean, he's always very good friend to me.
It turns out that Ben was going through a breakup as well, and Corey was supporting him through it. He even offered Ben a place to stay, and Ben was allowed to come and go as he pleased. It seemed that Ben had no reason to harm Corey, but to rule him out as a suspect, they wanted to know his timeline.
Were you over there at all yesterday?
Ben said that he was over at Corey's house all day, but after midnight, the two decided to grab some things from a nearby convenience store.
We left at 1 o'clock, 1:30-ish, 1:45. I don't even remember. After that, I did not go back.
Did you have the same clothes on all day yesterday and today? That's even changed.
The detectives did the same clothing inspection that they did with Nathan. But once again, they found no trace of blood, and his shoes did not have the same pattern as the ones at the crime scene. However, if Ben had stepped in Corey's blood, it would be foolish for him to wear the same shoes again. The detectives decided to obtain a search warrant for Ben's property to see if they could find any Air Force Ones or the murder weapon. Several officers headed over to execute the warrant, and they were once again met by Jimmy, who seemed to be doing an investigation of his own, and was beginning to wonder if Ben was a killer.
And this dude's already got a pistol. I hear about a murder. Somebody's involved, okay? There's wouldn't be guns around if somebody wasn't involved in something stupid.
After speaking to Jimmy, they followed him inside to begin the search. Inside the home, there were clothes and other items scattered everywhere. Unfortunately, the investigators were unable to locate any Air Force Ones, and the only gun that they could locate was a black BB gun. They still needed to find the black and pink pistol that the two women had told them about. They updated the detectives back at the station, who then asked Ben directly if there were any weapons present while hanging out with Corey.
Were there any weapons in the house last night that you saw?
As far as I tried my own business, I mean, I had a weapon on me.
Was there a pink and black weapon there?
Yes.
What was that?
That was an airsoft.
An airsoft gun? Who was that?
That was fine.
Curious?
Ben told them where they could find this black and pink gun, and the investigators were able to locate it and confirm that it was an airsoft gun. With nothing pointing towards Ben's involvement, the investigators concluded the search, and Ben was ruled out as a suspect. But since Ben was staying at Corey's house frequently, the detectives wondered if he had any information that could help them track down their killer. So they asked him a few more questions.
Do you have any idea who would want to hurt Corey?
To be honest, no. I really don't. He's humble, he's chill. He's my brother, man.
Now, Corey's been selling his stuff recently, right?
Yeah.
You know about that, right?
Gave her a bunch of clothes, gave me some things.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's had a lot of money around there. And you told anybody that he had any money around the house?
No.
You didn't tell anybody?
No.
The detectives asked Ben if anybody suspicious had ever come around while Corey was selling his things.
I mean, I had a few people come over, but that was one of them, I'm talking personally. And the bigger black guy.
Apparently, a black man was at Corey's house the night before his murder. He had seen Corey's listings online and wanted to check something out before buying it. But Ben said something felt off about his behavior. The detectives looked into Corey's phone records and discovered a call at 7:08 a.m. from somebody named Brandon Brown, who fit the description that Ben provided. Brandon has an extensive criminal history dating all the way back to a battery charge in 1999. Looking through Brandon's social media, the detectives discovered that he drove a white Chevy Trailblazer. On June 23, 2019, law enforcement went to Brandon's address, but the Trailblazer was nowhere to be found, and it appeared that nobody was home. Law enforcement revisited the home later that afternoon, and there it was, parked in front of the house. The officers staked out the property for a while, until eventually, Brandon and his wife Jessica exited their home and entered the vehicle. As they came driving down the street, the officers pulled them over, body cams rolling.
Man, you step out the car, man. So you turn away from it.
The officers placed both Brandon and Jessica in handcuffs and escorted them to separate police cruisers.
You don't have any ID? You have a driver's license? You have a state ID?
As they were transported down to the station, the Chevy Trailblazer was seized and taken to the state crime lab for forensic testing. Once Brandon arrived at the station, the first order of business was snapping a mugshot of him. They then made their way to the interrogation room, where they left Brandon by himself as he waited for the lead detectives.
Hey, Brandon. How you doing? Good. Any idea why you're down here?
All I was doing, trying to enjoy my son, y'all, went to church with her.
The detectives asked Brandon if he knew anyone by the name of Corey Hughes. He said that he and Corey were actually friends.
You ever been to his house?
Yeah, I've been to Corey's house. I went to Corey's house Thursday night.
Brandon claimed that this was the last time he saw Corey, but the detectives were confident that this was his vehicle caught on camera the morning that Corey was discovered. To be 100% certain, the detectives asked Brandon to describe his vehicle.
We got some questions about your Trailblazer. Mm-hmm. Is there anything on the Trailblazer that makes it stick out? What about the wheels?
Brandon told them that one of the tires was flat, and the spare tire that they replaced it with had a different color rim.
Her grandfather came over and helped me change that.
Which one's that?
On the passenger side.
Brandon described all of the same unique features as the Trailblazer that was caught on the security cameras. But when shown a screenshot of the footage, Brandon wouldn't admit that the vehicle was his.
Is this your...
It looks like mine, but I know a white boy has one just like ours.
Just like yours?
Yeah.
Has the same tire, same...
Yeah.
Brandon said that he didn't know this other driver personally, but he sometimes saw him driving around town. Since Brandon was being stubborn, they put the questioning on pause and went to a separate room to question Jessica.
All right, Jessica. My name is Detective Jones. This is Detective Evans. It's Jessica, right? I've already met you, but what's your last name? Okay. Is this one yours with the Misty Cub cap?
Yeah, that is one.
That was yours?
Yeah, because we had a flat tire, a blowout, and we had to change the tire.
Okay. Oh, you had to blow out. So is that a spare tire on there?
Yeah, it's a spare tire.
Does it have a sunroof as well?
Yes, it does.
Jessica had no problem confirming that the vehicle in the footage was their car. However, unless the detectives found more evidence, it would be Jessica's word against Brandon's. So before confronting Brandon again, they decided to look for more surveillance footage between his house and Corey's house that would encourage Brandon to confess. On the morning of the murder, at 6:51 a.m., a white Trailblazer was captured pulling into a Phillips 66 gas station, less than a mile away from Corey's house. Brandon can be seen exiting the vehicle and entering the store, heading straight for the soda fountain. From this angle, the detectives were able to clearly see Brandon's outfit, including the shoes he was wearing. Black and red Nike Air Force Ones. Brandon then pays for his drink, exits the store, gets in his car, and drives off. He turns onto East Missouri Street, headed in the same direction as Corey's house. To drive the nail in the coffin, the detectives quickly obtained a search warrant for Brandon's home and immediately went there to execute it. The lights weren't working, so they had no choice but to conduct the search in the dark and use their flashlights. During the search, the investigators discovered 2 firearms, a Beretta 9mm and a Bursa Thunder 380. The 380 matched the shell casing found at the crime scene. Now that they had a statement from Jessica, a host of damning surveillance footage, and what was believed to be the murder weapon, the detectives were finally ready to confront Brandon again. Just as the questioning was about to start, Brandon tried to retreat into his shirt, hoping that the detectives wouldn't find him. But the detectives weren't fooled by his expert camouflage, and after presenting all of the new evidence to him, they called him out for lying to them earlier.
Okay. You haven't been 100% true.
At first, he continued to deny his involvement, but the more the detective applied pressure, the more clear it became that the guilt was weighing on Brandon. Suddenly, he gave in.
Do you want to tell me about that morning? Did things get out of control? Okay.
Brandon said that he had planned to meet Corey at his house to purchase an item from him, but that morning, he had a strange feeling that something bad was going to happen, so he brought his gun with him.
Okay. What happened at the house?
I was starting to knock on the door and I just felt something wasn't right.
Okay.
When Corey answered the door, something seemed off about the way he was acting. He invited Brandon inside the house when suddenly...
He just clocked out.
Okay. When you say clocked out, what do you mean?
Just like some switch went on in him.
So he was angry?
Brandon said that as they walked into the kitchen, Corey suddenly pulled a knife on him.
Can you describe it?
Just a kitchen knife.
Okay, so it was a kitchen knife?
Apparently, just as Corey swung the knife at him, Brandon blacked out and heard a bang. The next thing he remembered was driving down the street and realizing what had just happened.
Okay. Did you have a gun?
You got the evidence, man. So
Is it the 380 from the house?
We both know what that is, man.
Although Brandon seemed to show remorse, his story didn't make sense due to the position of the body and the angle that the bullet struck Corey's head. As far as the detectives were concerned, this wasn't a case of self-defense. This was cold-blooded murder. In Indiana, the judicial system does not classify murder into different degrees. Instead, there are only 2 offenses that a murderer can be charged with: murder or murder by aggravating circumstances. Despite his criminal past, there weren't enough aggravating factors to charge Brandon with the latter. So Brandon was charged with murder.
Brandon Brown is accused of killing 27-year-old Corey Hughes. Investigators were able to track down Brown through surveillance video. Brown faces charges of murder and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. He was ordered to return to court on July 8th.
On June 30th, 2019, Megan and Corey's families held a memorial.
Now, Hughes' family remembers their loved one and tries to move on.
Corey is a very special person to us and our family. You know, whether it's getting dirty or doing whatever, you know, Corey would help anybody and not ask for a dime.
Now, family and friends say goodbye to Corey with messages on balloons and seek justice in the courtroom.
It's not going to hurt him sitting in jail forever. It's going to hurt these kids and not having a father for the rest of their life. And we will make sure to be at every court date, every hearing, everything to make sure this guy receives justice.
Thankfully, Corey's family wouldn't have to relive this tragedy during a trial, because on June 8th, 2020, Brandon took a plea deal. In exchange for a guilty plea for the murder and Brandon waiving his rights to appeal his conviction, the state agreed to dismiss the firearm charge. At his sentencing hearing, Brandon gave a statement in which he accepted full responsibility for his actions, apologized, and asked the court to impose the maximum sentence. He was sentenced to 55 years in prison and was given an additional 10 years for being a repeat offender. Brandon Brown currently resides at the Wabash Valley Correctional Institute in Carlisle, Indiana. He is set to be released in the year 2068. And as for Jimmy, he sadly passed away in September of 2021 at the age of 39. Through a bizarre series of events, it was Jimmy's paranoia that helped bring the perpetrator to justice. If he hadn't believed that his roommate was a killer, the detectives may have never spoken to Ben. and subsequently may have never learned the name Brandon Brown. Although he is no longer with us, his crucial role in the case of Corey Hughes will never be forgotten.